Is this how it works? Okay, let's see. What happens if I do this? Oh, okay. Interesting. I'm testing out the microphone. How does this sound? And it's coming out of my thing here. So what if I do this? Hello, Rando. Still trying to figure this stuff out, so I need a moment. What do you mean sign in to YouTube? Why do I have to sign in? I'm in. Oop. Oop. Oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna close the chat here. You just closed the dockable window. Okay. 1 second. Go away. Ah, is this what I'm looking for? Okay. I think so. Just gonna wait for a few more people to show up. Might make another post. Ugh. This whole streaming thing is a lot more complicated than it looks, actually. This is my password. Okay, that is not my password. That is not my password. Okay, forgot password. Hello. Okay, fuck it. I'll figure this out later. You've just closed dock window. Okay, I did that. I'll use this as a chat. Hello, everybody. Welcome. How are we all doing tonight? I am live. Just putting this out on all the socials. Telling my fans. AKA mom and dad. Just do another. Oop. Oh. Yeah, Aaliyah, you might be fucking it up for me. Actually, I think it's fine. I think I figured it out. But definitely not the easiest thing in the world. And definitely I feel a bit too old to figure some of this technology stuff out. Still having trouble with Instagram. Story. Could take a photo of myself. Say cheese. No. Yeah. I am live. Join me. Also, very sorry if the sound isn't ideal tonight. Still in Belgium. And yeah, the cat's probably gonna annoy me. A very meowy cat. There's a bird outside. Blue sky. Let's do that as well. No, I don't want to make an account. I have an account. Yeah, hello. Hi, Elia. Willkommen. Just waiting for some people to show up and letting people know. Why do I have to sign in again? I've already signed in. This is the future. All right, I'm in. Here we go. Ow, fuck. Sorry, there's a radiator underneath me. I lost a viewer. Quote post. That's me live. Join in on the convo. Just gonna say join in. Okay. Hi everybody. Welcome to my second live stream. How's the sound? Does it sound all right? Sort of experimented a little bit. So now not only Can you see me? But you can also see this, right? The YouTube. So we can watch stuff together. Sounds good, coming in clear. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Gonna see if a few more people show up. And then we can get to talking about Lebanon, which is always a very fun thing to talk about, especially because it is very simple and most people are in agreement, and so it's pretty straightforward to talk about. It's a small country with. Sorry, I'm not going to do these jokes, but I do want to do jokes. I find it very hard to talk about anything related to Lebanon or the region without being sarcastic, because it's such a fucking shit show, and it's like absurd. It's constantly absurd. I mean, just little things. Our new president is another Aoun, another from the family Aoun, but not related. But he's also a military man, so we have another General Aoun. I don't know. Like the other guy who was one of the other contestants for Lebanese Idol for the presidency was Sleiman Frangieh, who also, I mean, I think his grandfather was president, and his grandfather's name was Sleiman Frangieh. It's really like Game of Thrones. And it's why I had such difficulty learning the history of Lebanon, but also following Game of Thrones. Like, I don't know. I remember watching it and always being lost. Like, wait, who's that? Like, what's happening? Wait, what? I'd be watching with someone and they'd be like, oh my god. I'd be like, what? What? Don't you remember that's the guy from season 3? And I'm like, oh, no. Why does that matter? It's also the same with family. Whenever anyone tells me a story about someone, like whenever my mom tells me a story, or like a friend of mine about Mart ibn Am, but like the wife of my cousin. But in Arabic, there's no cousin. There is the son or daughter of my maternal or paternal aunt or uncle. So it's always this like, I freeze. Like, okay. And I have to do the full like family tree every time. Which is funny. I remember my grandma telling me a story, and every time she referred to her, like this person, she'd always say every single time, "For my," it doesn't translate into English, but every time she would say it, like, "For Mart ibn Amme came into the room," and then Mart ibn Amme said this and that. Mart ibn Amme, the wife of the son of my father's brother. So imagine that. Oh no, yeah, we don't have that. Cusino. Eich. Definitely not francophone. Although I did have an eclair just now. That's the closest that I'll get to the French and like liking it. Oh. Every time I come to Belgium, I just have an eclair a day. And it's this like cheap whatever eclair that's not this like fancy oof. Just checking if there's anyone else showing up. Badgering peoples. For those who followed up on my cat situation, it's doing much better. He took a shit the other day, and he's been shitting regularly ever since. So you don't have to hold your breath, in case you were wondering. He was constipated. My phone is so slow. Ooh. Nope. That's nothing. The amount of spam I got on Instagram. That's good. Glad the kitty is okay. Yeah. He hasn't thrown up in a few days. He's been taking shits regularly. We didn't have to take him to the vet to do like an x-ray, which we were afraid we'd have to because it's stressful for the kitty. And Habibi, he's like, 11 years old. So he's a bit of an older kitty. And he's very much so my kitty. I've had him for 11 years. I had him since he was like 6 weeks old. So, okay. Just gonna wait for a few more peeps. We've got 10 people in the room now. Hello, everybody. You can meet each other in the chat. This is live. This is actually happening. Yeah, there's so much text that I'm getting that I don't understand. Like, what are bit rates? Don't actually answer what bit rates are. I'm not going to understand it now. But it's telling me I need to reduce my bit rates? I don't know. Hello. Willkommen. So what I'm doing now is that I'm streaming on a software that then is getting sent to YouTube. And apparently this is the way it's done. I found it really difficult to like connect my microphone to YouTube directly. Chow was younger than 6 weeks old when you got him? No. Because like legally he had to be like 6-8 weeks old. You might be thinking of Dashir. Dashir, the one who you'll probably hear in a few minutes, is we got him when he was like 10 days old. He was a rescue. Little piece of shit. First time for me, first time for everything. Mike Todd. Second time for me doing this. So I hope I do well. Apologies, I'm going to smoke very briefly. It's CBD. Just helps with anxiety, which I'm sure no one is surprised that I have lots of. Mluchi, hi. Yeah, you met Chow many years ago. He's pretty much the same, but he's just older. But very much tostuzy. So yeah, for those who have joined already, I'm gonna wait a little bit, but then we're just gonna start talking about Lebanon. There's a lot to talk about. History, politics, geopolitics, movements, some of the sort of weird euphoria I think people have been having about the new situation. Yeah, politically depressed guy has anxiety. Yeah, I thought he just had depression. That honestly, to me, actually is one of the reasons that I really did not like studying psychology, which is when you discover like comorbidity, that is like people who exhibit symptoms of major depression disorder tend to also exhibit symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. There's just like such a they're not really discrete subjects. Oh, have fun. D&D, haven't done that in a while. D&D is fun. Dungeons and Dragons for any fellow boomers in the room. I'm joking. I'm at the age where I can play to both audiences. Although actually I can't play to Gen Z. I've noticed in the metrics of my podcast, I have no penetration into that demographic. I get much more over 60s than under 20s. Much more. And I tried dipping my toe into Twitch. And I might have to do this. Apparently through this software, I can just sort of stream to you're currently in WoW, yeah. Are you playing WoW Classic or normal WoW? WoW is World of Warcraft, which I also spent a good portion of my youth, and I got back into it a year ago or something, because they released the kind of original game and plays on that nostalgia. It's fun. Retail. Oh, I have no idea what you're playing right now then. It looks so different. But yeah, Lebanon. Let's get into it. So Lebanon is a country. I'm not going to do that. So basically, the reason that I want to talk about Lebanon is not only because I'm Lebanese, and so I know a lot about it, but also, I mean, I do have a kind of specific perspective that I don't see shared enough or spread or discussed or definitely not centered, which is a kind of essentially leftist, an anti-authoritarian leftist perspective, but also a critical perspective. I just think there's a lot of really shallow discussions of Lebanon that are just kind of built off of already pretty shallow discussions of Palestine. But understanding Lebanon just through Palestine, or rather, understanding Lebanon just through Zionism and anti Zionism, it's not the best. It's all right, but it's a starting point, and I think it's a lot of our starting points. I mean, all of us grew up, as leftists. The most immediate, direct kind of like enemy. I mean, it is an enemy, but you discover that it's quite complicated, or rather that the Lebanese bourgeoisie, or you start with the Lebanese political parties, then with sectarianism, and some don't get this far, but I have in the description that this is about the Lebanese entity, and I think that's an important starting point. Well, I don't think it's actually a starting point. It might be very confusing for most people, but a lot of leftists in Lebanon don't talk about the Lebanese state or Lebanon the country. They talk about the Lebanese entity. This is something I talk about in my most recent video essay, which is on Patreon for anyone who wants to watch it. It's for members and available for one-time purchase for 5 buckaroonies. Soon it'll be on YouTube, I guess, like maybe hopefully next week. But essentially the formation of the Lebanese state, it's kind of bonkers, and it's an entity, and it's quite an anti-Palestinian entity in its very structure, and like a very anti-region. Like it's sort of made to benefit certain people who have a lot to gain with this idea of Lebanon for Lebanon, like not Lebanon as part of the region or something. It's also very funny to talk about this stuff because I constantly don't want to make myself sound like I'm a pan-Syrianist or something. Like when I talk about the Lebanese borders or the Lebanese state, it kind of sounds like I'm saying we should form, into a pan-Syria, whatever, but no. And especially because a lot of formulations of that are ridiculous in themselves and still based on a kind of authoritarian whatever. But I think it's more historically accurate. Or rather, there are more historical ties between like Tripoli in the north with Homs and Hama in Syria than there are to Tyre or Sur in the south of Lebanon, which itself has a lot more historical kind of ties with Raqqa or Haifa. I don't know. These are literally colonial borders. Like, these are not organic, whatever. No border really is organic. But so, yeah, I'm here to talk about Lebanon. So if anyone has any questions, feel very free, because I'm very aware that Lebanon is not an easy topic, especially for those who aren't from it or from the region. And I don't know. We can also I was watching Hassan Nabi because I was doing my kind of market research. Hassan is a streamer, and I realize whenever I tell people that I'm gonna do streaming and that I'm a leftist and all this, they're like, oh, like Hassan Nabi. But it's very much so not what I imagine. He's very much so like a media personality that then continued. You know what I mean? He's a streamer. Um, I don't want to get that into it, like that into streaming. Um, and then you know what I mean with the sort of like takes and whatever. I want this to be a extension of the podcast, extension of my writing, essentially. But anyway, what I saw him do, which I found very interesting, is he was just sitting watching like an Al Jazeera. Um, it wasn't Inside Story, but it was like a clip of Rami Khouri, this AUB professor guy, who's like a regular on Al Jazeera English. Um, he just watched it. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of energy that I don't have. Um, Also, I have no idea how it works. The chat moves so quickly. I don't know how anyone enjoys it. I get it makes sense for the streamer because it's like, okay, if you pay, I'll read your comment out. That sounds like a nice system. But otherwise, for the people engaging in the chat, I don't understand people who engage in these chats that just keep moving so quickly. Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? I have no idea. That's a bad thing. I think what you and how you do it is a good thing and a necessary perspective. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to find a kind of good way of describing it because, but basically, I don't know, interested in so-called knowledge production. And, I don't know. I remember my brother asked me about Hassan Nabi and what I think about him. And it was more like, I don't know, what's he written? Or like, what's his thesis? Or like, what's, I know his takes, I know his things, his responses, his reactions, but it's like, in terms of like, as a leftist, what's his position on private property? Um, and not just what's his position, like what's he doing, um, or what historical tendency is he part of, like borrowing on. I don't know, but so I'm here doing a kind of public education for anyone who is interested, um, and I'm very happy to field any questions about Lebanon because again, what happens when you think of things from Lebanon, it becomes very complicated. Lebanon is very much so where simple narratives go to die. Um, and so, what that creates, I think, is that a lot of people either tend towards kind of conspiratorial thinking because there are so many players and there's so much coming on. Uh, but also, yeah, I mean, like domestically, regionally, internationally. And then even within, there's so much disagreements or whatever, or different. It's such a shit show. It's very difficult to wrap your brain around. So yeah, I'm here. I'm a lefty, but an anti-authoritarian one. If that's floats your goat. I've also done a lot of my own research, which I've noticed is something that just being Lebanese does not mean you understand Lebanon at all. The opposite. Oh my God, the opposite. Actually, there's this page that I'd been following for a while, um, which posted something that I found atrocious. It was this Wall Street Journal article with this headline, which is like buries the lead, which is like some bullshit about Iran sending briefcases full of cash to Hezbollah, Israeli sources say. And I was like, okay, and there was nothing else on it. And then I click on the link, it's behind a paywall. It's Wall Street Journal, which is already Zionist as fuck. Which, I thought we'd gotten to the point now in media literacy, but also in the last year and a half, to like really give an insane amount of like what's the term? Not benefit of the doubt, the opposite. The burden of proof, kind of. And so when I was asking people about it, I made a post about it, like, what's this guy doing? What's he sharing? What is this? A lot of people were like, oh yeah, this dude's had like a 180-degree U-turn since the escalation of the war. And basically, I remembered that people who are like Lebanon experts, pages that like kind of only talk about Lebanon, suck. They're the worst. Or they're really bad, because you really miss the point if you get too myopic with Lebanon. I think it's the same case everywhere, but to me, in order to understand Lebanon, you have to understand the region, you have to understand the history. You can't understand Lebanon without it. Yeah. Oh, questions. Hi, I want to ask how you see the new prime minister, since he was, I believe, one of the ICJ judges. Was he put there by the US to take him out of his role at the International Court? That is, I mean, again, so I'm going to say this without, it's not to dismiss that theory, but that to me is part of the kind of conspiratorial, and it could be true, is what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that, like, there's always these sort of games happening. And it's true. He was at the head of the ICJ doing the kind of case against Israel and its ongoing genocide. And the person who is placed to replace him is like the one judge who has constantly been voting against the rest. And so it's like, maybe. He does have a bit of a history. He is seen as like not a compromise candidate, rather, he's sort of, he was a big judge in Lebanon. I think he was voted in as the head of the syndicate, which was a big sort of movement during the October 17 revolution. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't have that much to say about him, only because I like to think more structurally. Like, what are the limits of the prime ministership? As nice of a guy as he is, as educated, he's got 2 degrees, he's outside of the sectarian system, but like placed within the sort of bourgeois oligarchy in Lebanon. The best thing he's saying is like basically make another technocracy, or a technocratic government, which we've tried before. And I think a lot of the problems in Lebanon are very structural. And so without addressing those structural things, it sort of feels like just playing with a rigged deck of cards. And I don't just mean sectarian, I mean neo-colonial and capitalist, Like, the best outcome that a lot of these people can imagine is that we form this technocratic government, we remove corruption or like bad whatever governance, and then get an IMF loan, you know what I mean? Or do a Cedar 3 Friends of Lebanon, and they give us a bunch of money, and so we become even more in debt, and we have to liberalize our economy even more. And, that'll be nice. Businesses will benefit, the sort of bourgeoisie will benefit, but for the most part, most people will still languish. But yeah. So I'll definitely talk more about our new prime minister designate. He is not yet the prime minister, but I have much more to say about the euphoria, and to me misplaced euphoria, about his him coming to the fore. One topic that I'm interested, having heard about but don't have a grasp of it, is the refugee situation there. Is there much organized resistance against it? Against the refugee? Well, okay, I can only imagine you mean against the sort of persecution of refugees. There's definitely not organized resistance against assault on refugees. Quite the opposite. A lot of the organizations in Lebanon, a lot of the let's call them grassroots, but a lot of them are very funded, civil society, have been all too happy to throw Syrian refugees under the bus, ignoring and whatever. I don't know how the situation really has changed since the collapse of the Assad regime, and with it, a lot of Syrians have gone back to Syria, or have been able to move back and forth with a bit more ease. But what I find very interesting about a lot of the recent developments, oppression, persecution, in some cases pogroms against Syrian refugees in Lebanon, specifically by far-right Christian, like, petty militias. I do call them petty militias because it's like 10 people or whatever. And they're very much so, like, emulating the militias that their fathers, or maybe even they did as a kid during the Civil War, that they contributed to. But what I find interesting is that so much of the actions and discourses against Syrian refugees are like parallels with how Palestinians were described in the 60s and 70s. And so, I mean, still described really, but they're not seen as that same present threat. And honestly, what fucking pisses me off so much about the way the Lebanese talk about Syrians and Palestinians, refugees in Lebanon, is, I mean, it's quite literally our own little Zionism. Like, it comes across so much when they talk about the demographic threat, when they talk about an existential threat, like they're going to come and replace us, and our way of life and our whatever, even though they're fucking the exact same. They talk the same language, the same dialect, they eat the same fucking food. Historically, there really is not that much of a distinction. And honestly, most of it falls on class lines. I'm not saying only the bourgeoisie talk shit about whatever, but whatever, sorry. But yeah, there's not really a grassroots organized against persecution of refugees in Lebanon. I don't know about the situation at the moment. It's still obviously pretty shit, and especially now with like the cutting of UNRWA, with the cutting of stuff like US aid. This is going to be disastrous for Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, and Syrian refugees. But yeah, it's very much so also like scapegoating, because again, like, the Syrian refugees did not steal all of our money. They did not blow up the port. They did not do the civil war. You know what I mean? There definitely is this situation that I watched happening. I saw the progress of this in Lebanon over the last few years, where it's like there was this very heavy momentum where for the first time in a very long time, October 17, we were all out on the streets talking about the same, Kilon yani Kilon. All of them means all of them. The sectarian oligarchy and the sectarian elite. Not this or that or whatever. And then the political parties that managed to co-opt that discourse then were the same ones to also really be leading the charge against Syrians. God, actually, Lebanon. Sorry. I'm going to stop saying this about like, oof, Lebanon, oof. But it really is. So it's good. It's good we're doing this. But yeah, let me know, Mark, if I didn't answer the question or if you want me to know more. Feel about the latest government there. Yeah, I just mentioned. So, I mean, it's like we yet to have a new government. It's still in formation. So I think a lot of the euphoria is not just misplaced, but also like very, what's the word? Not founded. Nothing's happened. It's just like leaks and this and that. So it's like very much so too early to tell. And so the euphoria, I find it just kind of nauseating. Julia Sabatinde? Oh, yeah, the ICJ person. Any political events in Central Europe where one can come shake your hand in the near future? I haven't done any things in Central Europe. I'm there, but I don't do anything political. They call themselves Jnud Rub. which is a bit funny because they would have called themselves Junud Allah, but something Allah brand is occupied by Hezbollah. Yeah, there is a very funny thing actually about the term Allah, because it just means God. But there's a very much so, and Maronite Christian parties or people, I mean, talk about Rab as opposed to Allah, even though they both mean God. But Allah is like, let's say, very Islamic coded or whatever. And then I noticed that it's one of those minor things that you see in translations and mistranslations where it's like the intentional, if they're translating something from Arabic, that they'll keep, oh, they were yelling Allahu Akbar or yelling Allah this or that, as opposed to they were yelling God is great. They were yelling God is something. From what I understand, even before there was prejudice against Syrian migrants in Lebanon, yeah. I mean, there is a film, I'm forgetting which film, about Syrian migrants or Syrian laborers in Lebanon in the like by 2005. But there is also just generally my approach to a lot of this, or my readings of it. When we talk about the Syrians, it's, again, we're talking about Syrian workers, Syrian laborers, Syrian migrants. And so I have these comments sometimes when I'm talking about this stuff that I just tell people, like, okay, this is nothing to do with them being Syrian. You just hate poor people. Because so much of the discourse just falls on those lines. They come here and they have like so many kids and it's like straight up like Reagan. Sorry, the cat jumped in. I have to close the door. Big back, book, 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 bam. The kind of shit that you could never understand. Allah is for bearded people, yeah. But yeah, there wasn't ever. There is a weird thing that people do when they conflate the presence of Syrian refugees with the presence of the Syrian regime in Lebanon, which occupied Lebanon from like 76 to 2005. Sorry, the cat is. I hope he's not. Please. He's such a chaotic furball. Okay. Which is just a ridiculous comparison. Again, that's the same thing with the Palestinians, because like there's a kind of thing wherein people conflate the existence and like presence of Palestinian refugees with like all the political Palestinian parties in the 60s and 70s, which, yeah, some of them were fucked. Especially then in like, yeah, the late 70s and whatever, but it's like, I don't know. I've told this story, but because I grew up in a tiny Christian area, I didn't even know Muslims also say Allah until I was like 15, yeah. Yeah, there is also this thing, like a couple of years ago, like I was saying, like what I'm bringing to the table in this stream and hopefully in my podcast and in general when I talk about Lebanon, a couple of years ago, I did a watch party, which is like we all sat around and just watched this like 15-part Al Jazeera documentary on the Lebanese Civil War. That could be a stream idea. Anyway, and it was a bunch of us Lebanese watching it, and so much of us, like, it wasn't just, oh, I didn't know that, but then we started sharing stories that were like, I've never shared this with other people. And that like like this person who lives in, she's Druze in the mountains. And apparently when her uncle was teaching her to drive, he'd be like, la, go that way, don't go that way. And she's like, why? It's like, that's a Christian area. This is like in 2000, or that a friend of mine was going to AUB, and a guy, his flatmate is from like a Christian area like just outside of Beirut, And it was later at night, and they're like, "You want to go to Bliss and get some stuff?" And the guy was like, "Go out to Bliss at night?" Which, again, for those who don't know, it's like the main place in that area to go out. It's just like all restaurants and food stands and whatever. So yeah, there's very much so like an ignorance within, and like it's like narratively, or our understandings of ourselves and our history and our societies changes from one house to another. We very much so do not have a unified understanding of our history. There isn't even like a main understanding. And then there's like fringe understandings. There's like pockets. And this is how sectarianism kind of manifests in one way or another. And then even internally, intersect, whatever. Actually, I love this so I'm Druze. I don't hide this. I'm a non-believer, but I come from a Druze family. And my entire life, things have always been a bit confusing. Like, I just remember always being confused. And, like, things would be clear to people, or they would, like... And so, like, I never had a heaven. I never had a conception of God. My parents never really talked about God that much to me. But also, we don't have a text that we read. We don't read the Quran. We don't read the Bible. We have texts, but it's reserved for the clergy. And even then, you have to be like 40. And so I started realizing that part of the reason why things were so unclear for me was because there's like such a lack of clarity about what we believe as Druze, that other people don't have. Most people have a kind of Christian background, and so they know who Gabriel is, or they have a kind of conception of right or wrong, even if they agree or disagree with it. My favorite example of this is during my new atheism phase. I asked my mother, who might actually be in the chat, and I don't know if she knows this, but this to me was like a iconic moment. I asked her, okay, it was like a gotcha question. So if there is such a thing as reincarnation, for those that don't know, the Druze, who make up 5% of the Lebanese population, but are quite big politically, believe in reincarnation. And they believe in we believe in a finite amount of souls that just kind of keep getting recycled. I don't think we have an idea of nirvana, wherein you're done, you did all the lives that you need to do, and now you've, graduated. So I asked her, how do you account then for the rising Druze population in the last 100 years? All populations have risen essentially. And she sat and thought about it, and I still remember her answer so well. It was iconic again, because she said, well, how do you know we're the only Druze in the universe? Okay, there's a rising population here. Maybe there's some other planet galaxies away. There's a falling Druze population. I just found that genius. But that's very much so what being Druze is like, in terms of like trying to look into things, like ask around, and everyone has a different answer, because there's no, which I like. I think honestly part of my problem with Lebanon, and okay, so to get a bit deep into it, one of my problems with some of the euphoria and discourse around the new government in formation, the new president, the new whatever, is that people are obsessed with statecraft. And very much so, the new president said this, like, what is his term? What is his era going to be? It's going to be one of the monopolization of violence, the sort of building of state institutions, of recovering whatever. And a lot of people on the left are like, yes, excellent, we need a state. And I find this very, very troubling, And it's very difficult to describe very difficult to describe the alternative, because all we see around us are states, and the only like functioning things are states. But the state comes with so much violence and so much tendency towards sort of supporting the bourgeoisie, primarily the job creators, and to Lebanese. Like, again, like understanding Lebanon from the perspective of the Palestinian or the Syrian is very important. It's not just, here's the main thing, Lebanon is for Lebanese, and then there are these fringe opinions. And I think that's part of the structural problems of all nation states that find its worst expression and its most disgusting expression in fascism, which is what we're seeing mostly now, which is an extension constantly of, Britain for the British, Germany for the Germans. And it's so natural. Yeah, it's their country. Lebanon is our country, so it should work for us before it works for anyone else. But that system, I think, inevitably falls in on itself, especially when there is no class consciousness and there is no class analysis. Because Lebanon for the Lebanese, are we talking about the Shia farmers in the south? Are we talking about who, are literally being occupied right now? So they're not being centered, obviously, because if they were, the Lebanese state also has never openly engaged in even defense against the Israeli occupation. And yeah, again, the state, the purpose of it, one of the main purposes of the state is not just the monopolization of violence, but is the protection and codification of private property. And I think the most clear example of this was a few months ago during the war, during the escalation of the aggression on Lebanon. There was this hotel where an abandoned hotel in the middle of Beirut, in Hamra, that a bunch of families who were displaced from the south, displaced from Dahi, from the south of Beirut, from the south of the country, sought refuge. They opened the place, they cleaned it up, they got their own furniture, they fixed it all up, and they're staying there. The landlord, who had essentially been an absentee landlord, also we'll get to that in a little bit, absentee landlords, Lebanese, whatever, was like, actually, I want this hotel back. And he had the paperwork to prove that it was his. Regardless of the people who were there, regardless of the war situation, regardless that it was abandoned up until that point and that it was the displaced who cleaned it up, he had the right to that property. It was his property. And so when he gave his eviction order, and people were like, no, we're not going to go, what the fuck? What happens? They sent the police in. And this isn't a situation of excess, of you know what I mean? Overstepping their mark, or this is again why I don't like discourses of corruption as the center. That is the structure, that is the purpose of the state. To defend private property. You own this thing. What happens if the tenants don't pay? If the people living there don't pay? If you want them out? Well, you have a right. And how is that right enforced? By violence, by the police. Now, where the excess comes in, though, and this is Lebanon, is that when the police were sent, people went to protest in front of the hotel and were like, what the fuck? We are in the middle of a fucking war, and you are kicking displaced people out of the places that they sought refuge. So the Lebanese authorities sent in the army. And the army came in and quelled the protest and prevented people from coming in. And I saw two really important scenes there. One, there were a lot of like chanting and yelling and whatever, traitors, Um, one of them, I heard one person say, because I was watching on a live stream because it was just completely fucking with me, is Lekul Dawli. Lekul Dawli. Look at the state. Look at the government or the whatever. Khalas. There is no. We used to have this very funny phrase, Waini il Dawli. Where is the government? It's not funny actually, but it's that kind of thing of like in a protest, like where's the government? What's like? There's the country's falling apart. Where's the government? No one asks this anymore. And I really like that moment during this protest against this eviction, because it was just directly, look, this is what the government's doing, this is what the state's doing. And a second thing is that people from inside the building, on the balcony, poured liquid that onto the cops. So some people said it's water, some people said it's oil. And basically what I saw the discourse, whatever, which was like very fucking interesting, is because there's a very famous story from the occupation of the South by the Israelis in the 80s, 90s, of a woman in her house who was cooking. The Israelis came, she kicked them out, and as they were kind of like walking, like leaving, she threw a bunch of like boiling oil onto them. To me, this was like a legendary story, literally a thing of legends. This thing of like mass popular resistance, like literally anything we have, we will resist you, even just like the oil and boiling and whatever. I later discovered that is part of that is within a documentary called Wild Flowers, Women of South Lebanon. I have a playlist on YouTube. If you go onto From the Periphery, actually, there's a playlist in there that's whatever. So yeah, if we're throwing oil onto the Lebanese army, or if people are throwing oil on the Lebanese army, harkening back to the throwing of oil against the Israeli invading army, then that's you know what I mean? Like that's exactly what I'm talking about that's exactly what leftists talk about when they talk about the Lebanese entity. Yeah. I find that very fucking powerful. But so the best we can hope for is a strong state. And I see a lot of people talking endlessly about, yes, we need state institutions, we need state or whatever. And like my approach generally is working outside of the state, building power at a kind of grassroots level. This is why to me things like the Syrian local councils or the resistance committees in Sudan are such powerful things, not just as forms of resistance and survival, but as modes of like new ways of understanding power relations and like how we form as a society. The local councils in Syria very much so were a response, and I think very curious to see what's happening now. A lot of them were crushed, and a lot of those people were killed or made refugees. The Sudanese resistance committees, though, reached different heights because they didn't just form and like do mutual aid and support protesters and support people in the community and provide electricity and whatever. They also had like a full-on political vision, and they wrote like a fucking huge charter, which again it was like that had the signatories of every single like there were resistance committees in almost every neighborhood across the country, definitely in every state, and I believe there's 8 states or no, there's a lot more. 18. Anyway, so imagine that. They wrote like a 60-page document, which was the revolutionary roadmap, a revolutionary revision of the history of Sudan. Literally like a plan for the situation and the future and whatever, who are the enemies, what we'll do with them, whatever. that got the approval of essentially like millions of people, which to me is like holy fucking shit. Because if you've ever tried to do it, Google Docs, Sudan, yeah, the Sudanese resistance committees and the political charters, look it up. Actually, basically, I have a new thing that I'm gonna test out. Well, let me look at these messages first. Hardcore lady, yeah, badass. What do I think of MMFD? Civilians. Well, it's in the name, and this is my problem with them. It's structural. Like I think the strategy is not. At very best, we're looking at a Singapore model, or like a functioning state model. But these sort of, I understand basically MMFD translates into English as citizens within a state. It's a political party. It's oppositional to the sectarian system and the sectarian, well, not the system, but the sectarian parties. I just things are so fucked that I need to have a kind of more radical vision of the future. Like it does nothing for me to pin any hopes of like, yes, what if we form a technocratic government that then can manage the state a bit better? Because again, what's the idea? Then okay, we need to then get funds, and within the system, so we need to get funds that'll liberalize the economy, that'll boost up the army, which is just bad for most people. But it's also basically what the last 20, 30 years has been. It just hasn't been successful. Have you met Sahab Shara? She's not too far from you. She's in Geneva. I know she's in Geneva. I'm not in Geneva, though. But I have been a few times, and I've always been whatever, and especially because her daughter came out as trans. Her child, whatever, I don't know actually their gender, but their daughter came out as trans, and Soha apparently has been like hella supportive and just loving Lebanese mommy, which to me, I love that for her. Because a lot of this generation has tendencies to kind of be a bit shitty, or rather not have been, I don't know, kind of badasses continually, you know what I mean? So I love Sahab Shara. I really like Sahab Shara. I need to read her autobiography. But okay, let's see. Can you see this? Can you all see this Firefox? I'm guessing you can, because I can see it. God, I need to find a better system. Okay, I got a yep. So, I don't know, this is cute, isn't it? You see me here in the corner. Do you see me in the corner? Wildflowers, women of South. So, okay, actually, here's something. Do you hear this? I'm just going to put a random bit. So this film is just incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. But I just want to show you this one clip. Don't know if I'm gonna find it. Sorry, I'm gonna mute this actually. Oh, here she is.
بالدار لحالي، عندي وليد صغيري بالدار صاروا يصرخوا إلا مشت إلا طحشت الأسرة.
So, let's start from the beginning.
أنا هوني بالدار لحالي، عندي وليد صغيري بالدار صاروا يصرخوا إلا مشت إلا طحشت الإسرائيلية علي، كل واحد محمل بظهره أكثر من جحش، جهازات وما بعرف شو. فيتوا علي عالدر وين بدي رح أنا؟ شو بدي أسوي؟ إيه مستني؟ انسحبت وطلعت حاطة بالبابور، حاطة على الطنجرة بدي أدف لوليدي، زايد بالطنجرة. صرت صرخ، لما صرت صرخ شيء ظهر وشيء ضل بأرض الدار. لمشت أنا الطنجرة، لمشت الطنجرة هاي، قل لي مير إياه. صار داروا لي قويس، لكن أنا لطست مع جنب الحطة ما عملوا شيء.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I don't know, I just, powerful ass fucking shit, but very real. And, also, again, like, I don't know, a lot of these discourses also, like, feminism seems to be a kind of fringe thing. Hello, Jude. Willkommen. Welcome in. So, Lebanon. What else is there to talk about? I mean, Lebanon currently, again, so, like, the euphoria I'm so fucking confused by as well, because even if we have the nicest, cool... YouTube is not... what? Is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth viewing? What does that mean? Can y'all still hear me? I'm getting an error message for some reason. Someone say something in the chat. Oh. Okay, that's really weird. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll just wait till I get back home to, lagging a bit, but you're good. Okay. Yeah, maybe it was the YouTube thing, but I have no idea what this error message is all about. Very strange. What does this mean? YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. How do I fix that? I have no idea. If you say it's fine, it's fine. Maybe I have to close, what's it called? Oh! I just closed YouTube. I hope you're all fine with this newbie experience. Big back book, 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 bam. The kind of shit that you could never understand. I've lost the chat. Oh, is that it? We're back. We're back. Oh, this is a nightmare. I have no idea what's going on. Oh, okay. I think I'm back. Yeah, I think next time I do this, okay. I think next time I do this, if I do this in the next few days, I'll just do it directly from YouTube, because I have no idea what's going on, and honestly, it's like, I feel a bit overwhelmed, because I actually don't know what's happening. Like, I don't understand how it works that I'm on the app, and the app is sending it to YouTube, and you're seeing it on YouTube, but I'm talking to the app. Maybe that sounds like it just makes sense for anyone else, but for me, I'm just like, I don't know, like a non-believer forced into believing. It's okay, Lebanon. You want to know an interesting thing, actually? And you're not going to get this anywhere else. Um, but there's recently been a flare-up of like violent crimes in Lebanon. And there was like discussion of like, is the new state, new government, new whatever, like it's this sort of test for them. And what I found a bit about that kind of discourse um, is because, again, of those that were the crimes that were focused on, it wasn't crimes against Syrian refugees, and it wasn't crimes against queer people. I'm part of a group called Queer Mutual Aid Lebanon, and we support queer and trans folk in Lebanon. And in the last couple of months, we've heard of at least 2 accounts of violent crimes against specifically Syrian trans women. And not necessarily because they're trans or because they're Syrian, but because they're Syrian and trans, they don't have access to the same like hospitals, networks of support, media attention. And so it's that kind of thing where it's like, is this actually an uptick? Or is this like a lag in uptick because it only matters now that it's happening to the Lebanese? Encoding overloaded? I don't know what encoded means. Oh, okay, it's gone. But yeah, there's very much so a kind of resurgence of like a patriarchal backlash that is very evident in the discourse. Like up until the war, up until October 7, like all the political parties in Lebanon were up in arms, um, like ready to do immense amounts of violence against whom? The gays, the women's. Um, these are the priorities. Um, like there was a whole thing about rainbow cakes. You know what I mean? Like Hezbollah literally was like cracking down on anything like rainbow related. And so, and not just them, like the Christian far right and like a bunch of political parties. And so it's just that kind of thing of it's not tangential. Like these to me are things that have never been addressed, that are still present problems, that are still like parts of the state and the society. And I don't know. No data, reconnection successful. I'm very sorry to do this again. Can people like react or give me just like a thumbs up just so I know people are still there? This is very sketchy. Oh, I got a little celebration. Okay, thank you. Uh, it's going in and out now. Sad. it was much more fluid when I was doing it directly through whatever, but I didn't have this nice podcasting microphone. Still here. So yeah, I have very little faith. I'm not that excited. I'm not that hopeful. But I'm also not incredibly cynical. The main thing that people do is either they have emphasis on like, no, it's this party, or no, it's this system. And then there's a lot of people in Lebanon who have just like clocked out. It's a very historical thing as well. Like, I'm not going to get involved. It's so fucked up. I'm still very much invested. I haven't given up. Like, I think that's the worst, or a bad reaction rather. But yeah, so the violence against trans people in Lebanon, and queer folk in general, is something that never gets reported. It never gets talked about, and the economic precarity that they experience. I don't know, but yeah, I am just generally much more interested in things that are bottom up, things that are sort of local autonomous initiatives, microeconomies, and the like. I don't know. It's also my burnout from NGOs in Lebanon, who also have been horrible, even the gay ones. Most trans women, most trans people that I know, most queer folk that I know, very much so. What is happening? Sorry. I keep getting warning signals, and I don't know what that means. So actually, I think I'm going to slowly wrap it up because I'm getting very frustrated. But I hope this was something. I hope you all sort of enjoyed it. I got a heart there. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to have to figure this stuff out. You can still hear me, which is important, but also I just worry that it's going to drop out at some point. I'm just not going to realize it. But I don't know. Is there anything anyone would want to ask me? I think I'm going to do more of this and like focus on Lebanon. The last live I did was very small, but I was talking about like Jordan and Egypt. Again, it's just that kind of thing. Like, I definitely noticed there's like a massive lack in the discourse. Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, the Arab bourgeoisie as a whole. Don't ask, don't. Coming from a Caucasus background, we have a don't ask, don't say attitude to LGBT rights. Does that apply in Lebanon? No. We're quite relatively open. I would say that if there is like a grassroots movement, it is like the feminist movement that has been very vocally queer feminist as well, or like have a contingent as queer feminist. And it's very much so like there's a bit of possibility of being open and visible, certain areas for sure. Yeah. I owe that a lot, honestly, to like our lesbian sisters, or like to like there is a feminist movement, yeah, like at a grassroots thing. I don't know about in the Caucasus. I mean, I know a little bit, but not enough. But I mean, I think for most people, like at a day to day level, you kind of just don't. Um, like I remember listening to this one Lebanese band, and asking a friend of mine, like, wait, is he gay? And he said he's or like he was like, yeah, yeah. And I was like, wait, is he out? And he's like, he's Lebanese out. I was like, what does that mean? But I knew exactly what he meant, where it's like people know, it's just he just doesn't say, you know. Because if you say it, khalas, that's a whole new shitstorm waiting for you. But it's very much so whatever. We also have queer spaces, bars, but not just bars. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think about the gay scene in Lebanon, It's very much so like gay men, gay cis men, Beirut specifically. But yeah, I found that it really just doesn't, it's not just Beirut, but it's also not just gay men. And it's also not just like the bougie kind of like nice bars that are like protected by the police. There are certain areas wherein, yeah, like a lot more working class queer folk hang out and are in community with each other. I want to ask why anarchists are always seen as the same as liberals in the discourse I hear from Arab countries. Seen by whom? Like by like Western commentators? Hey Eamon, I really appreciate your work as a black person in the US. It's really educational for me on the history of the Middle East, and I really appreciate the anti-authoritarian POV. Blessings to you. Thank you. Um, yeah. I think there's sort of solidarities that extend between a lot of our struggles, and that's why I find people whose analysis from a region of a region to be very lacking, because there's no ability to connect, let's say, the violence we experience, the imperialism we experience with, the white supremacy in the United States, for example, which it just is. And this is why I do value very much so like comments like this, but also like rooting my analysis in a kind of internationalism and an anti-authoritarian leftist one. Because yeah, you can see yourself a little bit in it, or rather our struggles. Okay, by lefties. So why do lefties see anarchists and liberals? Because of narrative. And honestly, I think it's a lot to do with the narrative set by the Arab nationalist regimes. But also, I don't know, because a lot of people that are call themselves lefties are just cosplaying. And so there's just this kind of us and them mentality. And that's really just not how anything works. And so basically, yeah, I don't know. It is really frustrating. I have been called a liberal a lot because I criticize Hezbollah. And so it's like, okay, who's criticizing Hezbollah? Oh, it's liberals, it's Zionists, and therefore you're a liberal Zionist. As opposed to, like, I don't know, it's just very strange. It honestly is sometimes a bit dumb. I don't like using that term, but it's just a bit, it lacks a sort of understanding of what any of these things are, and also what the goal of politics is. Like, when we're out, when we're on the streets, when we're struggling, when we're talking, when we're creating knowledge, when we're whatever, like thinking about our community, about, freedom isn't just a kind of ideal whatever. It's like a kind of necessity, the ability to like have some say in my life. And in some cases, it's a matter of survival. It's not just a kind of, I don't know, we aren't, I think, I don't know, leftists, it's a chessboard, and I kind of refuse to see myself as a piece in a chessboard, or my mother, or my community. But yeah, I don't know. But I also think, yeah, there's certain problems with these labels that I think there isn't actually a mutual understanding of what a leftist is, or what a liberal is, or what an anarchist is. I see a lot of people calling themselves anarchists, and they're just shit stirrers. Mark says, I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that anarchists will criticize all and will accept progress when it comes. Like, we're not going to throw people under the bus just for the right to claim an ideology, yeah. But also, yeah, leftists, I don't know. Honestly, my problem with a lot of this is that it's just not very clear what these people believe in. Like, what is the analysis? Like, when I find myself I'm no longer on Twitter, but when I see discourse, I definitely see people like cosplaying I am a radical versus the you're a liberal. And I think a lot of people just don't, like, it's not actually rooted in an analysis of why I believe this. Like, what's the idea that we have to support a certain political party, the idea of even some of the conceptions of resistance. It's just kind of, again, I don't want to say right or wrong or positive or negative. It's just I don't understand, and I don't think they understand. Um, and I think a part of that has to do with the kind of Twitterification of the discourse, wherein it just sort of feels good. It's the right thing. It's what Thomas Sankara said. It's what Hassan Kanafani said. It's what George Habash said or something. And so therefore it gives a kind of radical veneer because they said it, and so they must have known what they were talking about. This is why a big thing that I want to do, like my next video essay, might be on Edward Said, because I think a lot of people, most people who quote Edward Said do not understand him, his critics and his supporters. But also like when liberal Zionists use Edward Said, and I'm like, you fucking what? But yeah, or people who are like unapologetically or like unironically Hezbollah supporters, like people in the West, then using Edward Said, like, you what? You do not understand who this person is. Or again, at its core, when people talk about Orientalism and all they can talk about is like, oh, it's about stereotyping. It's like, no, it's not. That's not how his idea of like a discursive power of how culture is used in relation with empire. Like, it's not just about stereotypes. Like, it's deeper. Anyway, Mark says, my mother told me believe in and support humans first. Yeah. I don't know. I think it just comes with like a very healthy distrust in power. I've definitely noticed that lefties also have a kind of self-denial of their own power and agency, and that they want to have a leader and a ruler, even to tell them what to do. But more so, the term that I hate that leftists use a lot is the masses, which I have used. I do think it's a term, it's an important one or whatever. But I don't like it because it to me it's a bit elitist, because when people talk of the masses, I I usually don't find them talking about themselves. As in, when they talk about, oh, yeah, the masses will never wake up, I always do this thing of like, are you awake? Are you not part of the masses? There's always this like appeal to like the avant-garde-ness of like, I'm more aware than the masses, the rabble. I don't like that. I don't trust that. Um, this is why what I try to do as well a lot of the times is when I talk about things, I keep trying to put myself back into it somewhere. Like, at least be open about where I'm positioned within this, or where at least I see myself positioned in this. So my last podcast episode, when I talked about um, the daddy complexes in the Arab world, and I talked about how like Nasrallah was a massive daddy figure, I then clocked, I stopped, and I was like, honestly, kind of inescapable. And I felt it too. Um, and there is a kind of appeal towards, yeah, daddy. Jude says, it's an expression of feeling isolated, maybe. What is an expression? Will you? I find it funny how they fight the use of the word tanky. They ridicule it as anachronistic. I think it's because it strikes where it hurts. Yeah. I think mostly they don't like the term. But I think the one person who's tried to fight and be like, yes, we are tankies and it's a good thing, is Prishnad, who I will not talk about. Ochalan too, it seems in Royava. Wait, did I miss something, Jude? It's an expression of feeling isolated, maybe? What is? Oh yeah. Well, it's like a self-isolating, but I think because to me when I think of the term isolation or like feeling isolated, it's kind of it's a bad thing. But I think a lot of these people that talk about the masses, there's a superiority. I'm better than the masses. The masses that ramble, that are like the unthinking masses, you know. Whereas I, actually, my favorite expression of this is this play by Heinrich Ibsen called "Enemy of the People." It's hilarious, but by the end of it, the guy goes on a tirade of like, actually, it's bullshit. The masses are not always right. It is always the minority of men. And it gets a bit actually eugenicsy. It's a bit bullshit, but like set in the late 19th century, written in the late 19th century. It was kind of just like a rebuttal of some whatever, but it's also not like a good speech in terms of like it's good for the character. Like the guy's like losing it at that point. I have an adaptation that I worked on for like a year or two, long for like a script of a feature film adaptation of Enemy of the People, of that play, and I modeled the main character after Norman Finkelstein. Because basically, like to me, the analysis of the main character of the play is this thing of like, there's this one line from The Big Lebowski, and John Goodman's character keeps saying, "Am I wrong? Am I wrong?" And towards the end, the dude tells him, "No, Walter, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole." And I definitely think there was a point in Finkelstein's career where that was something that I think, or like I think that's like a core thing where like he could be very correct. I think just the problem is sometimes he's just a bit of an asshole. Or you know what I mean? Um, and so very much so it's set within like some of these like communication strategies, let's say for climate collapse, where you could very much so be saying the correct thing. It's just basically if you're yelling at people, no one's going to listen. Or like overly dooming. Things are very doomy, and it's this very difficult thing where it's like, I don't know, to say things as they are, it's very horrible, but then if you say them too much, people will just be like, I'm too scared to do anything. Or you may be right, but I'm not going to agree with you because I don't want to give you that satisfaction. Which has very much so changed my life, actually. I very much so used to have like a debate strategy wherein I basically like tire the other person out, like not consciously. But I remember getting into arguments with my parents, and every single time by the end of it, they'd always be like, okay, you know what? You're right. Just fuck off. Khalas, you're right. Go away. Okay, okay. And that wasn't very healthy for either of us. I never really enjoyed those those arguments. And so finding ways to communicate certain ideas, certain things that people may find disagreeable in a way where it's not I learned this from Bell Hooks, or Bell Hooks has this phrase, meet people where they're at, which oftentimes can be very difficult when we're talking about some people who have very problematic and or triggering opinions, or positionalities. But yeah, don't know any alternatives really. Will you asks, do you think we should or can find unity with tankies and anti-authoritarian conspiratorial, I guess, thinkers? Oh, but still pro-Palestine, anti-Zio people? If yes, how? Definitely not what I'm trying to do. Only because I don't think they're trying to find unity with us. And a lot of them have just directly done incredible amounts of harm. There's a distinction, I think, between those that are like the propagators of these narratives, the big names, those who actually do the thing. And for them, I just don't, I'm never going to try to convince or whatever. For people who like fall into it, I think that's a lot of people, and especially people in the West, who are like only clocking in recently to like Palestine, or and then also to Lebanon, as opposed to those who are just like raised with it. That a part of it is just a lot of misinformation and ignorance. So yeah. So there, but also again, I'm more interested these days in trying to talk to my own, and like kind of like bring out in the people who are already here, who already agree broadly, because I don't think it's just a matter of agreeing, because you might agree with me, but then it's like, or like, it doesn't manifest in any other way. And I think part of the task isn't just like convincing those who don't agree, but rather supporting and providing a kind of at least intellectual bedrock for those whose hearts are in the right places, to then be able to act a bit more confidently. Or you know what I mean? I don't believe you have to have the perfect analysis to engage in mutual aid, which I think is very valuable work, or like community care. I think most people that do mutual aid actually don't have good analysis, but that's perfectly fine. But so again, like we're talking about the difference between purely narrative, like the games we play on Twitter, and our lives and how we act in society. So yeah. Jude says, lol, yeah. This is why it's easy to like our charismatic daddy figures. Yeah. I don't remember what that's in reference to, but sorry if you find it a bit funny when I read the messages, because I Mark says, after the Chechen war thing and the harm I felt then, I couldn't ever work with them. Yeah. Listen, so like there's this person that I remember watching in this video by ContraPoints who I don't like anymore. But anyway, or I just can't stand. I can't. I feel so betrayed. But regardless, about this guy, this black man in the United States who like has like converted like dozens, if not like hundreds, of clan members to get out of the Ku Klux Klan. You know what I mean? And he just talks to them, he just befriends them, and he kind of like swallows their racism and their slurs. You know what I mean? Like literally does the thing of meeting them where they're at. And that's awesome. But that's definitely not, to me, my tactic or my strategy. And that's definitely not a strategy that I'm going to go around telling people, like, listen, have the full conversation. It's going to be hard, but everybody can change, you know? Because there are some people who are just disingenuous, who are just assholes, who are just grifters, who don't really give a shit about what they say and the implications of what they're saying. Sorry. I'm actually thinking of some people that I don't think people are thinking about. There are some big accounts that are like pro-Palestine that aren't necessarily tanky or whatever, but they're just complete bullshit. And it pisses me off so much how whenever I see anybody reposting them, it's like, do you know what this guy is? He's just an absolute, he has no idea what he's talking about. He is literally just using the Palestinian cause to boost his brand, which to me is gross. There's no one else is there. It's just random. It's just anything that kind of feels pro-Palestine. And like, the Jordanian monarchy, it says that it'll go to war with Israel. No, it fucking won't. Who the fuck believes that? Egypt is a sleeping giant. Yeah, my ass. But also that like Egypt is in any way like the Sisi regime is in any way antagonistic to Israel, and that it's just waiting for an opportunity. Like, no. Like, to me, some of these discourses are also very racist in the kind of way where it's like, oh, because they're Arab and so they must whatever. And it's racist, but also there's a kind of like Arab regimes played on it themselves. Like, we are Arab and so therefore we support our Arab brothers in Palestine. And that's why I also don't like the discourse of like collaboration. Basically that these are ours, or like our own. The Egyptians are our own people, and they're collaborating with the enemy, as opposed to they are enemies in themselves, as in the Egyptian bourgeoisie, the Egyptian regime, or the Jordanian monarchy. It's not that they're our allies, but they're doing a bad thing. It's like, no, they are literally, like, the Jordanian regime is, in my understanding of it, the second most anti-Palestinian entity in the region. And I think Lebanon is like the third, you know what I mean? Like the Lebanese entity, just by its very structure. Um, yeah. So it's wild. It's wild to see people, and again, not just as a Lebanese who's just like, I'm here. I'm not in Lebanon, but as in like sort of intellectually and whatever, where it's like, what? And then also seeing these critiques, or like these comments where it's like, do you know who Nabih Berri is? Like, do you know who? Like, these are not just like I'm playing a game where it's like gotcha. Like, no, these are like structural main things. Even someone like they I've seen people be like to show um Nabih Berri with like a Hezbollah member and being like, oh, this is the Muqawmi, like Nabih Berri. And there's just such a simplistic, reductionistic that I don't even know where to begin. Where it's like, no. But then again, as a leftist, then as a queer feminist, where it's like, oh, girl, this is all very messy. How's queer mutual aid doing after the war? We're doing all right. We're still around. We're still doing our due. Still supporting the community. Um, yeah, we've gotten a decent amount of new people on Patreon, which is helping sustain the work. Uh, but yeah, still very much so continuing our work. Mark says, if you knew the half of what the Jordanian state does, man, you know, the half of what the Lebanese state does. Or what the sort of modus operandi, drop a bit of Latin there because I'm but anyway, like what the state does, the Jordanian state, but what the state in general, and then even structurally, like how the Jordanian state came to be, how intimately tied to imperialism the Jordanian state is, how intimately tied it is to Zionism. I was talking about this in the last one. The 1947 secret agreement by the Hashemites and the Zionists to partition Palestine, which is essentially what happened. I don't know. To me, class consciousness is so important in all this. Just this awareness that it's not like, how can the Arabs do this? Like, where it's like when you understand that it's not Arabs versus whatever, the West or the Jews. It's like there's also, yes, the Arab masses and the Arab bourgeoisie, and the Arab sectarian elite in Lebanon and the military. There's so much of this thing where it's like the military, these are our brothers. This was a big thing during the protests where it's like going up to police officers or like riot police and like trying to kind of argue with them, or like, my favorite one is Dish Ma'ashak Ya Watan. How much is your salary? Like, because we're all getting fucked. Like, in 2019 and 20, like, just the banks were closed. They locked us out a lot of whatever. The lira was like getting. Sorry, I need to drink water. But yeah, understanding the police, the riot police, the army, situating that within a class dynamic. Yeah. This is again why I have very little faith of anything happening within the Lebanese state, within the model, whatever. We still can't show 4 fingers in Egypt? What's 4 fingers? Which 4 fingers? Is it possible to organize a support solidarity event from Zurich? Yeah, of course. A lot of people do. We encourage it, especially if you do it and then you raise the money, and we'll just send you the PayPal, because we're definitely like over a bit burdened with the work we already do. So we really appreciate when comrades abroad do a book reading, concert, poetry, cafe meetup, whatever, cheese and wine, charge people for entrance. We can send some stuff of like a QR code. But yeah, if anyone wants to do a thing for QMA and send us money, always. No Pudarte 77 says, hi, off-topic question about Lebanon. A lot of Lebanese music I found from the 70s, 80s used Palestinian poetry as lyrics. Do Lebanese musicians still platform Palestinian poets for this way? For instance, Isam Haj Ali and Marcel Khalifa. Marcel Khalifa for sure. I mean, is Marcel Khalifa Lebanese? I think he might be Palestinian, but this actually is a very interesting one. No. Lebanese popular art, I think now is very different than it was in the 80s. There was a lot of identification in the late 70s and 80s with the Fedayeen, with the Palestinian cause, and it was a very like popular thing, like literally in the music and the whatever. I think most popular music nowadays is just about love and bullshit and whatever. But yeah, there's a really, really interesting thing that... No, I'm gonna wait till I get to Vienna to start trying out, like I'm sharing my screen and showing different stuff. But there's a beautiful song by Fairuz from 1967 called Zahra al-Madina? لا, Zahrat al-Madain. Also the microphone is in such a weird place. Actually, it's a stream. I should be able to just play it on whatever. It's a beautiful song. It's it's like, it's literally made a year, or like the same year after the 67 war. And it's still played today. It's very powerful. It's got this like choir behind her, and it's all this like, the anger is rising and it'll come and we'll, and Jerusalem is ours, the land, the city of prayer, the city of flowers. We will walk into it someday and we will all pray together. Beautiful, powerful, I discovered that the writer of that song was Saeed A'el. I know no one knows who that is. For those that know, you know. Because Saeed A'el, by the 80s, who's a Lebanese poet and whatever, and a writer and whatever, becomes like blood-gurgling anti-Palestinian. I have a clip of him from the 80s, where he literally says that, yes, if Ariel Sharon comes into the country, like, I will be the first one to greet the Israeli army, which is a cleansing army which will rid us from the cancer that is the Palestinians. Like, I don't know what happened, but I think honestly a part of it must be that initially when he was giving a solidarity, it was very much so like that thing over there. But then once it came home, once the Lebanese started, not for the first time, but facing essentially the Israeli wrath, facing the violence of the Zionists, which, you know what I mean? Like, we're like, oh, the Palestinians brought this into it to us. that I think he shifted. And it's that really bonkers way that I've seen people do today, actually, that basically blame anybody but the Israelis for Israeli bombs. And I'm not saying all of them could get off the hook completely, but it's just like, it's bizarre. And like, but for Saeed Ha'il, it wasn't just anti-Palestinian, it was anti-Arab. He literally tried to develop essentially a format or a structure for the Lebanese language. He basically said, we don't talk Arabic, we talk Lebanese, which is a mix of Aramaic and Assyrian and a bit of Arabic and whatever. And there is this notorious asshole, Nassim Nicholas Talib, who is a kind of continuation or like builds off of that tendency. And he literally wrote a book, I think, a novel, which apparently the novel as a novel is just terrible, but wrote it in a Latin script in Lebanese, essentially. Which to me is so fucking funny, because it's not just a misunderstanding of like the language that we do speak, which is Arabic. There we have loan words. We have different ways of pronouncing things based on our own historical whatever. But it also misunderstands like history and how language fucking works. So like there is this history which is the Zionist kind of like that the some Arab some Lebanese Christian sectarian thinkers essentially manifested or like built on as well, of the Arab conquest, that it basically was like a form of colonialism. And so we were indigenous to this land. We were, Phoenicians, we were whatever. And then those Arabs came and they made us talk this language, but it's not our language, And it's like... and then making it sound as though it is the exact same thing as European colonialism of the last 200, 300 years, where it's like very direct. I don't know. But then also not understanding how language works, because basically they see what they're doing as a form of anti-colonialism in writing the language in Latin script. Because I don't think the people that were there in the region before the fucking whatever were writing in a Latin script. B, clearly writing in a Latin script is all about mimicking the West, which is what a lot of these people, like the Phoenicianist movement in Lebanon, similar to the Zionists, like trace their lineage within a kind of Western Judeo-Christian bullshit, whatever, you know what I mean? But also we don't think in script. Like that's not how language works. You know what I mean? That I think is like something that I've talked with some linguistic friends that I don't understand enough, but my linguistic friends tell me. Sorry, a bit of my Zizek came out there. Someone stop me, because I will do a full like Zizek thing. I'm getting an error code as well. Can someone send me like a thumbs up just to... There you go, that's a smiley face. Yeah. I do think though, very generally, it's so important to reckon and like dismiss some of their sort of like reactions, but be aware of it. Like as in a lot of these like far right Christian parties in Lebanon in the 70s that were like violently anti-Palestinian, they called themselves the resistance. This I find so interesting, and I don't think people know it. But the Christian far right, the people who did, to me, essentially started the Civil War, and did do some of the worst atrocities of the Civil War, and were allied with the worst actors. First, the Syrian regime, and all the while with Israel. They saw what they were doing as a reaction to an invasion. And again, they call themselves the resistance, still to this day. They hold anniversaries of the resistance. And I remember looking at what does Jaja have to do with the resistance? And it's like, oh, they have a complete different understanding. Because for them, there was a resistance against the Palestinians. But now with Trump and with Musk, there's this I don't know what to do with this info, but I've basically written an article which seems like it might actually get published on Al Jazeera. Actually, congratulations, me. It'd be my first Al Jazeera article. That was actually kind of a dream when I was growing up. When I was like 15, 16, reading Al Jazeera, that was like, I wish I was one of these people. And now I'm kind of doing it, and it's like cool, but it's not this thing where it's like, yes, finally, I've made it, Mom. But essentially that a lot of the far right in the United States like posit themselves as how do I say it, like as resistance to the state, or as resistance to PC culture, or as to the Democrats, to the woke mind virus or whatever. Even what Elon Musk did by doing a Nazi salute, there's this, I track that basically not just obviously to the 1930s, to literal fascism in Europe and this creation, whatever, but also to 4chan, which is also mixed in with this kind of debates in the US about free speech. Because I understand there is stuff, but I think from this far right kind of contingent, or not contingent, it's a fucking big thing. When they talk about free speech, to me, it is essentially how I see it. The freedom to say the N-word. The freedom to do the Nazi salute. I should be allowed to do whatever I want. Who are you to tell me I can't do this or that? And so there's that feeling of almost like being persecuted. As in, I'm having my freedom of speech taken away from me. And so within this post-Second World War, let's just call it order, of that like Nazism is bad and fascism is bad, I like the term the Overton window of the things that's acceptable. And again, things like doing the fucking Nazi salute or saying like N-word, these are outside of the Overton window. And to white supremacists, that's essentially like unfair. And so to them, when they do this stuff, it's like an act of transgression. And again, I've been on 4chan for a long time in my youth. Very funny story. Talk more about it at some point. But some people just go on, and because it's anonymous, they just go in and they write the N-word and they leave. They say faggot. You know what I mean? They say whatever. Like things that literally you are not allowed to say. But again, you know what I mean? Like things you're not allowed to say. Out of context, that makes sense. If someone tells me, no, you're not allowed to say that, my reaction is, why? Who are you to tell me? But, yeah. So it's a perversion. But so it's like a lot of bullshit, but it's like, it's not like understand it so that we can reach them or whatever. But partly understand it so we can avoid a lot of bullshit. That's where I'm starting from. Like, one of the most ridiculous things is that Elon Musk did a Nazi salute. Oh, it's because he has Asperger's. Again, to me, how I was phrasing it is it's kind of like he publicly said the N-word. And then a lot of people come and say, oh, he's got Tourette's. It's gross. It's also this weird use of, I hate that, but I just ignored it. I was like, no, I'm not even going to approach. I'm not going to indulge. I'm not going to whatever. He did a Nazi salute. And then his denial of it afterwards is part of the kind of trolling. You know, he didn't do the salute and then afterwards was like, yeah, I did it, so what? He did it and he was like, no, I didn't. Oh, and then he made a bunch of Nazi jokes. Again, which were straight out of 4chan. And all his fans, it's all about like, you know, haha, masterful gambit. He did it and he got away with it. That's the point. Getting away with it is the point. Part of the point. But there is like trolling for trolling's sake. But again, the richest man in the world, like there's a material thing here. It's not just games. Like, he has an audience and yeah. So yeah. There's also this very cool new manifesto by a group called The People's Want. The manifesto is called Revolution of Our Times. And they talk a lot about how oppressors and like authoritarian leaders frame themselves as liberators. And I find that fascinating because it's true. And that they're not, no one comes and presents themselves as counter-revolutionary. Rather, they come and they present themselves as having a certain interpretation of the revolution. And that's kind of true across the board. That's actually very true with like more classical leaders. Hafiz al-Assad, when he took over, I think he called it like a restoration revolution. Because essentially like he claimed to be going back to the original roots of the Ba'athist coup, which he calls a revolution, which went astray. And then he came and he was like, no, I'm taking it back to like what it meant to have had been. Sisi as well in Egypt, when he did his coup against the Brotherhood, against Morsi, he packaged it as in like basically the revolution's gone awry. And here's a guy who's going to take away the revolution from you, so I'm going to take over from him so that we can go back to the revolutionary thing. I promise there are elections. I promise. It's been 10 years, 11 years. And I think it's never been worse in Egypt for average Egyptians. Economically, politically, disenfranchisement, dispossession, humiliation. Like, not just like literally with the currency or whatever, but if you ever talk to an Egyptian or like see the roadworks, the highways that Sisi's building as part of his kind of like Saudi inspired development projects, humiliating as fuck. Like kind of essentially forcing people to live under highways, or like literally have highways just passing right whatever, and you can't say shit. Because you say shit, you go to jail. You go, or like you get whatever, and then you're just there forever. Fucking hell. And this is the rising giant. Basically, I advocate for revolution everywhere. Which to me is, I don't know. In Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon. And not in a kind of utopic way, even though I don't think it's a problem to have a utopic whatever. Thank you for joining, Mark. Gonna go. I'm gonna wrap up actually because it's 2 hours. That flew by. Hope you enjoyed this for those who are still around. I just like this. I just like talking. But I also like having a chat that people talk to me, and so I kind of whatever. So, thank you all for listening. I've got the Ko-fi tip jar in the comments. I'll probably be doing this more, maybe in a few days. Honestly, maybe even tomorrow. I have no idea. I just actually kind of like this, and I want to get a bit better at it. I want to get to the point where I can start sharing stuff, figure out the whole internet issue, sit and like watch stuff with people and like comment. And yeah, so I think that's it for me. I'll see you all in the next one. Ciao. See ya.